Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, outsiders and in-betweeners. My name is Cameron Harris, and I am running for mayor of Chicago in the 2027 election cycle. Tonight, we're going to be frying up some pork chops. I have been obsessed with the CERN Large Hadron Collider since I was in high school. I would even ignore some of my classes and the instruction going on to read on, our school approved, laptops, iPad, electrical appliances, to view and read the research coming out of the CERN Large Hadron Collider. A lot of the research out of the CERN Collider has to do with, new particle physics, new material sciences, new, pharmaceutical molecule creation. And I've always been consistently disappointed with the results from the Large Hadron Collider because you never see an implementation of the materials in real life. My house is still made of bricks. My car is still made of steel. Nothing in my material life has changed because of the research at the Large Hadron Collider. Even the pharmaceutical and medical applications, I never see repeated in, continuous research. I never hear about it again in other science magazines. What has interested me about the Large Hadron Collider is that it achieved the highest man-made temperature in human history at approximately 5.5 trillion degrees Fahrenheit. And that led me to believe we've been misapplying the technology. A nuclear reactor works by using radioactive fission materials to boil water. That water is then converted to steam, where it is pushed through high pressure tubing to spin a steam turbine. In the simplest explanation, it is literally a steam engine that is powered by radioactive fission materials instead of gasoline, diesel, or coal. The fact that the CERN Large Hadron Collider achieved such high man-made temperatures makes me wonder how much water it could boil if it were used with the same application. Instead of using fissionable materials, I've always thought that we should use salt ions, salt molecules, salt particles spun through the Hadron Collider, colliding them together at 5.5 trillion degrees Fahrenheit to boil water, generate steam, and then push it through turbines to create energy. I am disappointed that the governments of Sweden and Denmark are actually building a new Hadron Collider because it will be the same nothing burger research produced at the CERN Hadron Collider in, Switzerland and France. I will put a Large Hadron Collider in the Pacific Ocean, in the volcanic triangle, between Australia, Japan, and the United States. Somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, but that has access to both ends of the world to supply energy. To me, it is so obvious and so simple to use salt ions because, there are desalination plants all over the world. There are desalination plants all over the East Coast. And the two largest products of desalination plants are drinkable water and salt. Whereas a desalination plant, through steaming and reverse osmosis processes, will extract fresh water from the salt. And so you're left with literal trucks and trucks, mountains of salt. And I propose we spin the salt through our Large Hadron Collider in the Pacific Ocean, powering the entire world. I've considered this for quite a few years, and I've never understood why this would not be possible. So, tell me if I'm wrong, because this is something I will accomplish. A few months ago, I bought myself a new phone. I bought a Samsung A17. And when I first started using the phone, I went into the Samsung Messages app, the standard one on the home screen with the blue icon, and it gave me a pop-up asking me to sign in to my messages through my Google account. And I've never understood the necessity of this, because why does Google require me to add an account to see the messages in my phone? The strangest thing about it is that you can access the Messages app, and for a split second, I can see all my messages back there. I can see all the outgoing messages, all the incoming messages, and then a Google pop-up happens, which means that the Samsung app and the Google pop-up are two separate applications running in parallel. That Google is aware that you can use this app without interference and chooses to hold it hostage from you, forcing you to make an account. I hated that. I loathe that. And so I've still yet to actually add an account to my messages. And I continued to ponder this over the last couple months. And then lo and behold, the Alphabet Corporation, Google's parent company, is assigning $80 billion to new AI development. And that's when it clicked in my head. That is why Google wants you to make an account, so that they can see, store, and transfer the data in your messages. I've become aware of an Indian company called AI Plus, who is claiming to make their own, local India phone. And during the press conference announcement, the gentleman on stage mentioned that the data from the phones, your messages, your pictures, all of that would be stored in the cloud using Google storage applications in India. And that got me thinking about how much data the Google company owns, how much data it observes, how much data it collects. Because even though there's no reason it's necessitated for me to sign into a Google account to view my messages, I have to, which means Google has access to my private messages. The fact that AI Plus is parading that your data will actually be stored with Google means that they, the Google Corporation and Alphabet Corporation, can view your data. Google is the largest search engine on the planet. YouTube is the largest video content holder on the planet. And now Alphabet Corporation, which owns Google and YouTube, is going to use all of this data for their own AI development. And I am harrowed by this knowledge because it feels so forced, so obligatory, so captured. The Trump administration is proposing that all federal workers should sign NDAs. And this is the first step in a long process towards obscurity, especially within the Pentagon complex. And this is what I was referring to when I touched on the concept of illegal orders, because we're approaching a time in which soldiers will be forced to sign NDAs in which they won't even be able to describe to each other or themselves or in front of Congress what sort of missions they were asked to complete without government retaliation because of the NDAs. If government workers are asked to sign NDAs, this will be the start of a very dangerous and obscure time in international conflict. I truly do believe that we are preparing for a war. I will continue to speak of the America's War, where the United States government will invade, the countries of Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, Peru, Chile, for dominion of the, America sphere of, our hemisphere. And I truly believe this more and more with news reports that come out. The Department of Energy is allowing private companies to purchase its old stocks of plutonium. And I believe the Department of Energy is trying to create a new nuclear device. That is the reason they're trying to offload all of this old fissionable material, because it simply is not powerful enough anymore. It's been sitting around since the Cold War. It's 80 years old. It doesn't have the destructive capacity that they're wanting. And so they're selling it to private corporations to make room to import new plutonium, and they're going to make a bomb. My running hypothesis is that they will drop this, new device, this new bomb on the country of Colombia, or let's say Colombia, once the America's War kicks off. We will be at a complete disadvantage in an upcoming modern conflict. I, on occasion, like to review those old war videos from the Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria invasions. And what always gets me is how soldiers have Xboxes, how soldiers have iPhones, how soldiers have access to the internet, to GPS, hackable technologies. In the time of the 90s to 2010s, the countries of, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan did not have as wide access to, cell phone and internet technology as they do in modern times. And so when, Private Collins boots up his Xbox at base camp, signs into his Xbox Live profile, nothing happened because, enemy forces, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Mujahideen, Saddam Hussein, the government of Iran, they were unaware that soldiers had these things. They were unaware that you can actually track IP addresses and GPS data based off where someone logs into with their Microsoft profile. But the countries in South America of Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil are not disconnected from modern technology. They are not third world countries. They are countries who are suffering impoverished economic conditions with first world standards. They have cars, they have electricity, they have iPhones. They're poor is the problem. And so when the Americas War kicks off, and, we send Private Walsh down to South America, and he decides to sneak his iPhone through, security and protocol clearance, and he decides to just take a picture over the bow of his boat. Your phone captures GPS data about when, where, and coordinates of how this photo was produced. And the governments of Venezuela will be aware of this. And so they will be actively searching for GPS and satellite pings of signing into Microsoft accounts, of using Xbox accounts, of phones being snuck through. And so we will have generals in the future completely baffled at how, friendly squadrons are being compromised. And it is because Private Johnson snuck an iPhone through, decided to take a picture of the sun coming up over base camp, and compromised the entire platoon's position. And in 30 minutes, a Venezuelan missile will make that camp disappear. As strange as it is to talk about, sometimes losing a war is actually politically advantageous. Excuse me. President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, is always in the news about how, there's economic catastrophe in Russia, about how, at some point, one of the dominoes of the Russian economy is supposed to fall, and this will collapse the Russian war effort. And this is a complete misunderstanding of how the Russian economy actually functions. Everyone always ignores the fact that Russian oil and natural gas companies are 50% state-owned by the Russian Federation, by the country of Russia. And it actually became a good idea to allow these companies to flounder. It was actually for President Putin's benefit that Western countries, such as the European Union, the United States, and Canada, actually canceled our investment in these foreign Russian oil and gas companies. Ultimately, when these companies start to experience true economic hardship, you'll hear about mass layoffs in the news. And to the casual person, it's awful to be laid off from your job. And so the people will clamor for the president to step in and do something. And this is what I mean when I say sometimes losing is politically advantageous. President Putin will step in and seize these Russian oil and gas companies. He will funnel state money into them, keeping people's jobs, thereby making him a hero in the public consciousness because the president has saved the company. He saved your job. He is now the reason your family is continued to be fed. And the best part is, he doesn't even have to repay any foreign investment. When the European Union canceled all of that $50 billion of investment in Russian oil and gas, that meant that Putin, President Putin rather, didn't have to pay anyone back for the property he's about to seize. I truly do believe that, the capitulation of the Ukrainian government is near, and the capstone of President Vladimir Putin's victory will actually be providing the Russian citizens jobs in this new 100% state-owned Russian gas and oil company. Some of the most startling news that I haven't seen anyone properly address is the slowing of GDP growth within America. The White House, President Trump administration, a couple months ago, released the first quarter domestic growth in 2026. And they actually wound up underestimating it by 0.4%. The administration claimed that there would be an increase in American goods bought by foreign nationals to a tune of 2%. That the American economy as a concept will sell 2% more goods than it did, the fourth quarter of 2025. And it is shocking to underestimate and miss this number. A slowing of GDP growth directly correlates that American companies are not meeting their internal sales expectations. That even according to outside witnesses like the Trump administration, we are failing to sell as many goods as we did last year, as we were expecting. And I expect that one day our GDP growth will become negative, that we will actually see a shrinking of the American economy. And when GDP growth is negative, when that number goes from 1.6% to negative 1.6%, that signals that the American economy is actually in debt as a concept, that companies like Walmart or Target are not selling goods, but rather bought more goods on credit than they could sell. And that's what that negative implies, is debt. And when companies go into debt, they begin to fire workers, which will actually increase the shrinking of the economy. As people fail to produce more goods, they are fired. And as people are fired, they fail to purchase goods, which will mean goods are lacking in production, which means more people are fired, and the cycle will eat itself alive. I have claimed in the past that I believe President Trump will one day seize the Federal Reserve to pay off, the national debt. And one of my hallmarks, one of the triggers I've been looking for is for that GDP number to start going down. And now it has gone from 2% to 1.6%. I am now expecting it to be negative one day. And when that happens, President Trump will seize the Federal Reserve as a panic move. As such, American USD, American currency, will become insolvent because there is no financial institution or physical goods such as gold or land property backing the value of currency. And so when the administration uses this bundle of now useless money to pay our debts, creditors will actually call us insolvent because the money is worthless as it is backed by no guarantee of goods. The director of NASA, I believe, is also on the chopping block. Months and months ago, the director said that he was tired of taking orders from private contractors and private companies when it came to, shuttle building, when it came to the project of a moon base. And that was such a mistake on his end. Respectfully, that was the end of your career, because the moment you fail, they will fire you because you made the mistake of telling them no the first time, and now they hate you. Telling them no means that they will have you replaced by a yes man. They will call it a cost-saving measure, but it's something that's been in the works for quite a few months now because he told them no. Have you guys been made aware of the Abraham Accords? What an awful idea. This is the proposed treaty between, Israel and Iran and the United States over peace in the Middle East. And I know that this deal is in bad faith simply because of the name Abraham Accords. None of these people involved in the naming of this process are clearly even slightly aware of the religious connotation of calling it after Abraham. Abraham has 2 sons, which go on to be the founders of the tribe of Israel, Isaac, and the tribe who would become the modern Arab people, Ishmael. In the Bible, God called Abraham to sacrifice one of his sons. Depending on whose canon you believe, he was going to sacrifice Ishmael. He was going to kill the founder of Arab identity, the foundation of Islam. And so, naming it after the moment that their culture, their people, their religion was almost killed is actually an insult. It is a spit in the face to Muslim and Arab peoples, because it is putting Jewish people, the tribe of Isaac, before the rest of them. Because Abraham did not kill Isaac. Abraham was stopped from killing Ishmael. There is a huge religious difference. Personally, I believe in the God of Abraham. as strange as it is as a Catholic, I pray to God, the God of Abraham, the God of Christians, of Catholics, of Jewish people, and of Muslims. And this is from a stance of equality, from a stance of guessing, I suppose. Because what if, as funny as it is, what if I'm wrong in my Catholic thought that, Christianity, Catholicism as a concept is the only way forward? And so I pray to the God of Abraham. And the distinction is so important. It is so it is so important to change the name of the Abraham Accords to literally anything else if you would like to secure peace, between the three powers of, the United States, Israel, Iran, and the Arab neighbors. Because according to the name of this treaty, none of them are equals. That Arab identity, Muslim identity, is on the chopping block because that is where Abraham almost left them. I saw in the news that the President Trump's, anti-weaponization fund has been, canceled, allegedly. But I had always wondered who were going to be the true recipients of money like that. You know what I mean? Everyone always wondered out loud if it was going to go to, the people involved in, the January 6th Capitol riot. And I never, ever believed that. I had always assumed that it was going to go to, senators like Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, who were involved in the planning and coordination and unrest of January 6th. It's worth remembering that because of their involvement, their families were brought in for questioning. Their personal devices were taken, their emails sorted through, their correspondence measured. And so the money from the anti-weaponization fund would actually have been an apology to those people for what they were put through, for their complicity. I am glad that the weaponization fund is canceled, but I will not be surprised if there is another attempt to push funding through to these people as a apology, as a thank you for what they went through to help make January 6th happen. What I think, the whole thing is a complete catastrophe. The UFC boxing match, taking place on the White House lawn that, the Trump administration has formally invited, U.S. soldiers at the soldiers' own expense even to go to the show, to sit in, short sleeve dress uniform would be the most miserable thing I could ever imagine. Sitting in open, sky seating with no trees, nothing but the sun beating down on you. Because let's be honest, there is only going to be 2 awnings at the match. There will be one over the president's booth because the president cannot be uncomfortable and neither can the first family. And the second will be over, the cage itself where the fighters are performing because, they were paid like $1 million each to be there. They're too expensive to be uncomfortable. They will demand awnings. They will demand cooling. But, the audience, the soldiers, nobody's going to care. And so, I guarantee you, soldiers will be told in an internal memo or right before getting there that they are recommended to, pack their trousers, to pack their dress uniforms with bags of ice. And so it will be embarrassing for these soldiers to stand up and it will look like they all wet themselves. You know what I mean? Because they've been shoving ice packs in their pant legs, ice packs in their crotch, because they're sitting in 90-degree heat cooking to death. And that's the only thing that anyone will do to make them comfortable is to recommend they shove ice packs in their pants. As always, thank you so much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen, Outstanding In-Betweeners. Again, my name is Cameron Harris, and I'm running for mayor of Chicago in the 2027 election cycle. I often wonder about the best way for people to remember my name. I think often about, King Ozymandias, a man who never even existed, and the point of his story is that he was forgotten. And yet, the story itself being perpetuated, being posted now online eternally by me, means that King Ozymandias as a concept will never be forgotten, even though the traveler looked upon all he had conquered and it was gone, all of it forgotten. In the upcoming election, I will assume that many people will have to write my name in. Cameron Harris. CameronHarris. I don't know the best way to not be forgotten by you, ladies and gentlemen.